Thursday, September 19th, 1963, 2:17 p.m. The afternoon shift at Torrino Brothers Meat Processing Plant in Queens was running smoothly. The industrial grinders hummed with their usual mechanical rhythm, processing thousands of pounds of beef for New York's restaurants and butcher shops. In Conference Room B, overlooking the factory floor through soundproof glass windows, Russell Bufalino and 13 of his most trusted lieutenants were conducting the final planning session for what they called Operation Clean Sweep, a systematic elimination of every independent black operator in New York. At exactly 2:17 p.m., Russell Bufalino would discover that he wasn't the only one planning a systematic elimination. The industrial grinders didn't stop humming. They just started processing a different kind of meat. When the authorities arrived 6 hours later, they found 14 empty chairs around a conference table, 14 abandoned coffee cups still warm, and surveillance footage that would be sealed by federal order and never released to the public. The official report stated that Russell Bufalino and 13 associates had disappeared during a routine business meeting. The truth was far more horrific. They had been processed through industrial meat grinders while still alive, their remains mixed with thousands of pounds of ground beef and distributed to restaurants across New York. Bumpy Johnson had turned a meat processing plant into the most efficient body disposal operation in criminal history. To understand why Bumpy Johnson chose such a grotesque method to eliminate Russell Bufalino, you need to understand the threat Bufalino represented in September 1963. He wasn't just another mob boss. He was the architect of Operation Clean Sweep, a coordinated plan involving 5 crime families to eliminate every independent black criminal organization in America. Russell Bufalino had spent 2 years studying what he called the Negro problem, the fact that black criminals operated independently of Italian authority, controlling territories and generating revenue that should have belonged to the traditional crime families. By September 1963, Bufalino had documented 2,047 independent black operators across 15 cities. His plan was methodical and brutal. Eliminate the leadership through coordinated assassinations, then absorb the remaining operations into family control. Bumpy Johnson was target number 1 on a list that included every significant black criminal from Detroit to Miami. But Bumpy Johnson had been watching Russell Bufalino just as carefully as Bufalino had been watching him. July 3, 1963, 11 weeks before the meat plant incident, Bumpy received crucial intelligence from Detective Raymond Murphy, his source in the NYPD. "Bumpy, we got a serious problem. Russell Bufalino's been building something big." They met at their usual spot in Central Park, away from listening ears and watching eyes. "What kind of big?" "Coast to coast big. He's been coordinating with families in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Boston. They're planning something they call Clean Sweep." "What's Clean Sweep?" Murphy handed Bumpy a manila folder. "Everything we could gather. It's not complete, but it's enough to scare the hell out of anyone with dark skin and a criminal record." That night, Bumpy studied the intelligence for 4 hours. What he read changed his entire understanding of the threat he faced. This wasn't about Harlem or even New York. This was about the systematic elimination of black organized crime across America. The plan was scheduled to begin on October 31st, Halloween night. Simultaneous coordinated strikes in 15 cities. 2,047 targets eliminated in a single night. The end of independent black criminal operations forever. July 15th, Bumpy made a decision that would shock even his closest associates. Instead of going into hiding or trying to warn the other targets, he would eliminate the entire conspiracy by destroying its architect and leadership in one decisive strike. But first, he needed to understand Russell Bufalino's routine, his vulnerabilities, and most importantly, where he conducted his most sensitive business. August 1st, Bumpy began his surveillance operation. Through his network of service workers, taxi drivers, and street-level informants, he mapped Bufalino's movements, meeting locations, and security procedures. What he discovered was interesting. Bufalino was paranoid about electronic surveillance, restaurant meetings, and any location that could be easily monitored by law enforcement. But he had one weakness: his legitimate business investments. Russell Bufalino owned pieces of 17 legitimate businesses across New York and New Jersey: restaurants, construction companies, trucking firms, and most importantly, Torrino Brothers Meat Processing Plant in Queens. The meat plant was perfect for sensitive meetings. Industrial noise made electronic surveillance impossible. Multiple exit routes provided security options. The location was isolated from residential areas, and the business provided perfect cover for disposing of evidence. August 20th, Bumpy confirmed that Bufalino used Conference Room B at the meat plant for his most sensitive meetings. The room overlooked the factory floor, providing visual confirmation that the facility was operating normally during discussions. More importantly, the conference room was directly above the main processing floor, where industrial grinders operated 24 hours a day, reducing whole sides of beef to ground meat in minutes. September 1st, Bumpy initiated Phase 2, accessing the target location. Torrino Brothers employed 127 workers across 3 shifts. The company had contracts with 94 restaurants and 31 butcher shops throughout New York. It was a legitimate, profitable business with real employees doing real work. But like many businesses in 1963, it also employed workers who had criminal records, limited options, and reasons to be grateful for second chances. Marcus Torrino, the plant manager and Russell Bufalino's cousin, remembered when Bumpy had helped him resolve a labor dispute in 1961. Union organizers had been pressuring his workers, threatening strikes that would have cost him hundreds of thousands in spoiled meat. Bumpy had made the problem disappear through quiet conversations and strategic pressure. When Bumpy approached Marcus in early September, the conversation was brief and direct. "Marcus, I need a favor, a big favor." They met after hours, when the plant was closed and private. "What kind of favor, Bumpy?" "I need access to your facility for a few hours. I need control of the processing equipment, and I need you to be somewhere else when it happens." Marcus studied Bumpy's face. "This is about Russell, isn't it? This is about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Russell's family, blood family." Bumpy placed $25,000 cash on Marcus's desk. Sometimes, blood isn't thicker than money. Sometimes, it's not even thicker than water. September 10th, Marcus Torrino gave Bumpy complete access to the meat processing plant, including the industrial equipment, security systems, and Conference Room B. What Bumpy discovered during his reconnaissance was that the meat processing operation was far more sophisticated than he'd realized. The industrial grinders could process 500 pounds of meat per minute. The conveyor system could transport material from the conference room level directly to the processing floor. The cleanup systems were designed to eliminate all organic material completely. Most importantly, the facility processed so much meat daily that an additional 3,000 pounds would be completely unnoticeable in the daily output. September 15th, Bumpy arranged the meeting that would end Russell Bufalino's life. Through intermediaries, he sent word that a major independent black operator in Detroit was willing to negotiate surrender terms in exchange for territory guarantees. The message was exactly what Bufalino wanted to hear: evidence that Operation Clean Sweep was already working, that black criminals were so intimidated they were seeking terms before the operation even began. Bufalino agreed to a meeting on September 19th at 2 p.m. in Conference Room B at the meat processing plant. He would bring his 13 key lieutenants to witness the first surrender and begin planning the absorption of Detroit operations. September 19th, 1:45 p.m., Russell Bufalino arrived at Torrino Brothers Meat Processing Plant in a convoy of 3 black Cadillacs. He was accompanied by Vincent the Bull Romano, Anthony Tony Nails DiMarco, Paulie Steaks Benedetto, and 10 other key figures in his organization. They looked like successful businessmen arriving for a board meeting, which in many ways they were. The business was systematic murder, and they were there to finalize the largest operation in organized crime history. 2 p.m. All 14 men were seated in Conference Room B, reviewing maps, target lists, and operational timelines. Through the soundproof glass windows, They could see the meat processing operation below. Workers in white coats, conveyor belts moving sides of beef, industrial grinders reducing everything to uniform ground meat. 2:15 p.m. Bumpy Johnson entered the facility through the employee entrance, using credentials Marcus Torrino had provided. He was dressed as a plant supervisor, carrying a clipboard, and wearing the same white coat as the regular employees. 2:17 p.m. Bumpy activated the system he'd installed over the past week. Conference Room B had been modified in ways that weren't visible to its occupants. The floor had been undermined, supported only by hydraulic jacks that could be remotely controlled. The chairs had been bolted to metal plates that connected to a conveyor system. The conference table concealed mechanical arms that could restrain anyone seated around it. When Bufalino and his 13 lieutenants realized what was happening, they had perhaps 30 seconds to understand their situation. The floor began tilting downward. The chairs began moving toward openings that led directly to the processing floor. The mechanical arms emerged from the table, restraining anyone who tried to stand. Russell Bufalino's last words, according to audio surveillance Bumpy had installed, were, "What the hell is happening?" What was happening was systematic processing. One by one, the 14 men were delivered via conveyor belt to the industrial grinders below. The machinery that had been designed to process beef processed them instead, reducing them to uniform ground meat in less than 4 minutes. The industrial grinders didn't distinguish between beef and human tissue. The cleanup systems didn't differentiate between animal blood and human blood. The packaging equipment didn't separate legitimate meat from evidence. By 2:82 p.m., Russell Bufalino and 13 associates had been completely processed through the meat plant's regular production system. Their remains were mixed with 12,000 pounds of ground beef, packaged according to standard procedures, and loaded onto delivery trucks for distribution to restaurants throughout New York. 2:30 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the meat processing plant through the employee exit, removed his white coat, and drove back to Harlem. 6:00 p.m. When Bufalino's associates realized he'd missed 3 scheduled phone calls, they sent men to investigate. They found empty cars.